Good morning. Good morning again. This is the second installment of House Government Operation and Military Affairs on this lovely Thursday morning. We are here today with Vermont's Adjutant General of the National Guard, Gregory Knight, and I'm going to give him the floor. And before I do that, though, my apologies for needing to turn things over in 10 or 15 minutes to Representative Byron. I have to go and testify in Ways and Means about our bill that we passed out yesterday. So apologies, General Knight, for missing some of your testimony, but I will now give you the floor, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated. Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity. So I understand today is more of an introduction to the Guard. I'm hoping in the near term that we've got planning on 4 one-hour sessions of what is in essence Guard 101. For some of you, Senator Morgan, that'll probably be a little bit redundant, but there may be some subtle changes since you served. I figured it'd be good to know who your Adjutant General is. So Mr. Ruggiero, who's my executive officer, I handed out my bio, also available online and probably via my Wikipedia page. But I appreciate the opportunity. I want to talk a little bit, I won't get into the details of how we're built. I want to get kind of the broad strokes of what the Guard is and kind of how we operate. Many of you know we have both state and federal missions. We execute both of those extremely well. If I look back at the COVID pandemic, past 2+ years now, what the Vermont Guard did is not insignificant. So we can give you the statistics on it, but I do know over 70,000 vaccines were administered across Vermont. We built an alternate care facility twice. We did that first at the fairgrounds, actually second time at the fairgrounds as well, but we did that with our civil engineering folks from the Air Guard. And then it was kind of an all hands joint effort, Army and Air, to get it built. Modular, had hot and cold running water, had nurses stations, deep sinks, had 400 bed capacity, had power run to every bed, and it had a 50 COVID patient pod with negative air pressure to prevent the rest of the facility from being contaminated by the virus. We did that with the initial cost of about $235,000. Corps of Engineers, building a like facility without any of those amenities in Chicago, for about $3.2 million. We were just better. And that's because of the expertise and kind of the frugality that the Guard brings to this. And central to that, the military department personnel who were integrated into contracting made sure that our civil engineers never went without material. So that's kind of the capacity and capability that the Guard brings. While we did that, we also responded to the United States Capitol twice, once on January 6th, and then again for the Freedom Convoy. While we're doing that, we're preparing to simultaneously, we are continuing preparations to make the F-35 fighter wing operational, which we did December 31st of last year. So on 1 January, received our operational status. And then it wasn't, as you all know, not 90 days later, we received the call. In essence, is the 158th Fighter Wing ready to support the NATO mission in Yukon, the air policing mission? The answer is the same as it always is. We're ready. And what they did in doing that operation, they were up and out and flying missions in less than 30 days. They did that with 4 fewer C-17s, which is our cargo aircraft, Air Mobility Command, and 100 fewer personnel than our active duty brethren. That's significant. Our Guard is accessible, our Guard is affordable, and we exemplify that just about every turn. Concurrent with COVID response, our Army National Guard prepared for and deployed 950 soldiers to European Command, which is Europe, Central Command, also known as CENTCOM, which is Southwest Asia, and Africa Command, working in the Horn of Africa. So Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, which is where Lieutenant Burke was. He's my aide de camp. So we remain a very busy organization. I'll leave it to the end to talk about our recruiting challenges, because it's not just it's enterprise-wide. It's not just a Guard specific, certainly not just Vermont. But having you here is important. And I go back to, in fact, I spoke to some of you on Saturday with my comments. Thank you if you were able to attend our legislative visit. Those are important. I've been in this job, I think, about 6 months. And it occurred to me that nobody had asked me from the legislature, the people that put me in office, how's it going? So I figured it'd be good practice to start sending updates to the legislature, because Vermont is unique. We are not a gubernatorial appointment. as an adjutant general, we are elected by the state representatives and senators. That makes us unique. And we can talk on another day about that process. But I thought it would be important to build more of a relationship than we had previously. And we did that, one, by communicating more effectively and more consistently. Every 6 months, I will send you a legislative update. The first 2 pages, we've made it pretty easy because you're all buried in legislative email. I completely understand. First 2 pages are an executive summary about what the Guard does. It'll be complete with hyperlinks to articles about our Guard over the past 6 months. So the next one comes out in February. If you want more detail, we'll give you another 7 or 8 pages of facts, figures, data, percentages, things that you might find important in the work that you do here. So in conjunction with that, and I was speaking earlier, when we talk about legislative engagement, there are many caucuses here. There's a women's caucus, an education caucus, an environmental caucus, lots of legislative interest groups. What we didn't have was a National Guard caucus. So it was 2 years ago, August, I spoke with Representative Laura Sibilia, and I said, hey, I'd really like a venue to speak to the legislature and share the Guard story. And that became the catalyst for what is now the Vermont National Guard and Veterans Caucus. So we'll meet monthly. As many of you know, Representative Byrong is one of the co-chairs. This is an important area for us to communicate. It's the venue that we have. And understand, I am not always the spokesperson for the Guard. I know this much about this much. What's more important for me is to have my members come down here, Air and Army, of all ranks, and learn about the legislative process and understand why it's important for them to share their story, because they're your constituents. And there are folks that have subject matter expertise that I don't have. They're doing the job. So it's very important for them to come down and be able to talk to you about what it is that they do and how it impacts the Guard enterprise. But as a result of that legislative engagement, and Representative Byrong certainly knows, I could not have foreseen the level of collegiality, the cooperation, the candid discussions that we have about issues that face our Guard and our veterans. That's important. And other states are paying attention, as I mentioned earlier. We had one of my colleague from Illinois reached out, and I mentioned this at an Adjutant General Association meeting a few months ago, and he said, hey, tell me more about this caucus thing. I sent him my legislative update. I said, here's how we interact with the caucus. I put him in touch, I think, with Representative, well, actually, Chris, you did, my executive officer. So we've got the network started. Their construct is going to be different. Some states, their governors they're pretty restrictive on the amount of engagement that an adjutant general has with the legislature or the congressional delegation. I have a great deal of latitude with Governor Scott and with the legislature. I'm going to capitalize on that and make sure we're continuing to tell the Guard story. It's a like relationship with the congressional delegation. When I have my colleagues from other states call and say, how is it that Vermont has $60 million of military construction between now and the end of FY26? So I texted my senator and asked if that was something they could support. And the response was, let me get this straight, you can text your senator. Yes, that's uniquely Vermont. But again, I will also capitalize on that to benefit our Guard. So it's an important relationship. I will share everything I can as frequently as I can. There are some things, if it comes, for instance, to an investigation or Privacy Act or things that are by regulation I can't share. You know, I'm not going to violate due process or somebody's privacy. Everything else I will share, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You're not familiar with the state partnership program? I would encourage you. I really can't capture all of it in the time I have today. The state partnership program is a significant element of what we do as a Guard. It's in addition to our state and federal missions, the DoD program. You can look it up online, just type in National Guard State Partnership Program. There are 93 nations involved in 87 partnerships. Some of them are island conglomerates, so they have multiple island communities participating in the partnership. This started in 1993, as it still is a largely military to military relationship. We've been with North Macedonia 30 years next year. We've been alongside them from the dissolution of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia to now North Macedonia, our newest NATO ally, helping them to focus on interoperability, range operations, medical readiness, recruiting, equity of opportunity within their military. It's pretty expansive. So we've been with them for almost 30 years. We've been with the Republic of Senegal for 15 years next year. About a month ago, just before the African Leaders Summit in DC, I was able to go down and meet with President Macky Sall of Senegal and talk about our relationship. He's also the president of the African Union. That he took time to meet with me before that African Union meeting is not insignificant. He values the program and understands it is a true partnership, because I really can't replicate in any training that we do here the experience that our Guard members have when they go work with their colleagues in our partnered nations. And just this past spring, we signed a partnership, you probably saw it in the news, with the Republic of Austria. Each partnership is different. They have their kind of their own personality, and they have their own needs and desires in the direction that they want to bring their military. But we're a part of that. And what I'm working pretty diligently to do, and I realize the potential of the program goes well beyond military to military. I am certainly honored to do the key leader engagements with those senior military and civic leaders and our respective partners. What I think is really important, if you really wanted to see the true value, is to watch the interaction of our soldiers and airmen with their colleagues in those respective countries. They're there because they want to be there. They are the reason this program is successful. They're friends, they're colleagues. And for me, it's a great retention tool. People who participate in these, they want to stay in the Guard because they're making a difference. One of my major talking points is security and stability is not just military to military. That's why I'm trying to grow beyond mill to mill, increase civic engagement, and I'm meeting with folks that can make that happen. I met with Barry Seguin a couple of months ago. He's the director of the George C. Marshall Center. And they're very interested in building a bigger relationship with North Macedonia. They've been with Germany, I think, for 30 years, if not longer, 60 years probably. Their focus is good governance, rule of law, addressing corruption. So if you look at the size of Vermont, and particularly the legislature, and his quote was, we could try to apply the federal government as a player in this conversation, but that Byzantine form of government doesn't translate well to a country the size of Macedonia. This state house does. And I mentioned to him, again, the caucus, the importance of these relationships, kind of the reporting channels that we use, sharing information and ensuring that there's civilian oversight of our Guard. They're very interested. So we'll see where that goes, but there may be a role near term for legislators to visit North Macedonia once we get that off the ground. That's just one piece of it. We can talk commerce, trade, community development, environmental conservation, renewable energy, agriculture, all the things that Vermont does really well. And it's not just state government. We have honorary commanders. That's another program I can talk about if you're interested, but it's the Cliff Notes version is we're bringing in business leaders, educators, civic leaders who are, in essence, centers of influence in our community. And they become an honorary commander. It was an Air Force program. Our Air Guard probably has one of the best ones in the nation. So good, in fact, they have now an alumni association. And those honorary commanders help the Guard tell the story. So, I'm Army, I can learn from the Air Guard. I started a program on the Army, and now I have an honorary adjutant general. All of my colonels, the colonel level commanders, have an honorary commander partnered with them. And it's just a great education and helps us potentially exponentially share the story of the Guard. So for me, it's about, in essence, marketing, messaging, making sure that everybody understands the opportunities that are there that come with service in the Guard. I come back to the legislative relationship. Our Guard, because of our work with the legislature, probably has the best education entitlement in Guard Nation. We changed it a little bit again next year. We've got language pending for another modification, focusing on some niche areas where those higher education opportunities are now not here in Vermont. We went from helping to pay for a bachelor's degree to authorizing a second bachelor's degree, an advanced degree, and certificate producing programs, and instead of the Northern Vermont University rate, payable up to the UVM in-state rate. So that, again, And the other part of that, it's not just depending on our state college system. That benefit also applies to private institutions. And I don't know of any other state that does that. So that's a pretty big deal for us. That's a significant incentive for us to offer folks that want to join the Guard. You had mentioned student loan repayment. We do have a student loan repayment program, at least in the Army National Guard. If you have a 4-year degree and you join the Army National Guard under the commissioning track, the officer candidate school enlistment option, you go to basic training, and when you complete your commissioning, it comes with a $50,000 student loan repayment. So the incentives are there, the benefits are there. Trick, and I'm going to talk about recruiting here. It's one of my biggest challenges, but it's also one of my greatest passions. Because I use myself as an example, and you can see in my bio, I didn't go the officer track. I've been in the military longer than some people have been alive, almost 40 years. I started as an E1 with no college. And you fast forward to now, because of the Guard, because of the military and the opportunities that it offers, I've got a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees, and I'm an adjutant general. Anybody could do that. You just have to take the opportunity when it's there. Right now, recruiting is a challenge, has been a challenge, probably for the past decade. And I do a lot of work at the national level. And what I'm finding is sometimes when you get inside the Beltway, senior staff, senior people, they grab these talking points, these catchphrases and buzzwords, and they cling to them. One of them is, well, we did a study with the Joint Advertising and Marketing Research Service, and it shows that the propensity to serve isn't there. And now that has become the mantra. Well, the propensity to serve isn't there. We have to change our marketing. The propensity to serve isn't there. Yes, you need to change your marketing. But keep saying the propensity to serve isn't there is, to me, starting to sound like an excuse. For me, the propensity is there. My job and our job, is to educate Vermonters. So right now is why recruiting is important. If we don't, the Guard is unique. We have to recruit our own. I don't have the luxury of calling Human Resources Command like you would on active duty and say, I need more logisticians. I need more infantry. We don't have a Human Resources Command. We have our own recruiting teams, Air and Army. We have to put our people in the Guard. Every state has that challenge. Propensity to serve is there. One of the things, and I'll talk through some of the things that we've done to try to get at this problem. I just met last week with Ali Jang from Burlington, Sandrine Kebwe, who's the president of the New American Advisory Council, and Patrick Brown, who I've known for years when I go back to my time as a state liquor investigator. And the propensity to serve, if it's not in one community, is probably in another. If I look at the new Americans, the lawful permanent residents who have potential to become new Americans, that propensity to serve is there. And first, we have to establish trust, which is the point of the meeting on Friday. It was an introductory meeting, but we want to build something that is sustainable, that we can actually, it goes beyond my term. It goes beyond most senior leaders in the Guard. You build something, we have to build that trust. But there are a number of vignettes, and I shared this last month with all of the other adjutants general. They all have different sizes of communities within their state. Share the information, put the opportunities in front of them, and let them make the decision. Understand, I am not the face of that. The face of it should be those soldiers and airmen that we have in our Guard that are new Americans. I can tell you, one of my young soldiers who's an E4, a specialist, came to us at age 8 from Somalia. And I met him last summer in Rutland. He's a brigade engineer, battalion soldier. And I asked him, how's your experience been and what brought you here? He came to us at age 8 from Somalia, and his perspective is, he said, when I got here, I couldn't believe I could have a glass of milk whenever I wanted. That young man is now one of our combat engineers, and he is a UVM engineering student, and we're paying for that. That's a pretty powerful message. Another soldier or airman came to us from Sierra Leone. He was so proud to join the Guard, he showed up in a suit and tie at his enlistment ceremony. His work ethic was so strong that he went to work for us on orders full-time for a year in the middle of that pandemic. And he, in essence, ran the Strategic National Stockpile Warehouse as a junior member. And I don't know how many hundreds of millions of pieces of PPE they pushed out throughout Vermont to take care of our hospitals and first responders. They're out there. So there'll be a role here for this legislature and for you as representatives to share that with the communities that you have, either via social media, front porch forum, whatever it is. But I'm certainly going to lean on you for that. I just think the opportunity is there. But we put those success stories in front of those respective communities across Vermont. We can turn the corner on recruiting. We've got to get the word out there. The other thing we have, and again, there are many, many well-kept secrets in the Guard. State partnership is not the least of them. About a year and a half ago, we signed on with the Program for Youth Success, also known as PAYS, because we have to have an acronym. What PAYS does is if somebody joins our Guard, it was originally an Army program. If they join our Guard, we will guarantee them an interview with up to 5 participating employers. I'm not guaranteeing you a job. But what I will do is guarantee you we can help you build a resume. We will help you with interviewing skills. We will align you with an employer and see if we can't find you full-time employment and you can have a dual career track here in Vermont. So we've signed up a number of businesses that is growing. My goal is to take the lead in this, be the lead state in this program for youth success. We've got state police. I think we've got the state of Vermont actually signed up for that. Perigo, Global Foundries, DA Collins actually in New York, because I'll poach from New York. I don't care where our enlistments come from. But it's good business for us. The other thing we've done is I've incentivized our Guard members to put people in. So I call it, I hate to admit it, but I actually borrowed a good idea from Alabama. And it's called the Joint Enlistment Enhancement Program, also known as JEEP. And what this does, if you are a soldier or airman and your rank is between E1 and Major, 04, and you put somebody in the Guard, when they enlist, we will pay you $500, and when they ship to basic training, we'll give you the other $500. So $1,000 incentive. It works. We're continuing that effort. I think in the 2 years we've had that in place, we've got 69 enlistments from that. We're going to keep doing that. So as long as I have the budget within my military department to do that. We initially put $50,000 against it. Once that's gone, we'll do it again. I have to put people in the Guard. The reason that's important, if we don't, big picture in Guard world, we will lose force structure. Because National Guard Bureau, part of the Army enterprise, at least on the Army side of things, they have an end strength mission. When we say strength, we mean actually assigned paid personnel working in your Guard. Right now I have somewhere north of 500 vacancies in our Guard between Air and Army. If we don't correct that, fairly near term, at least show we're making progress, I will probably get a notification from Guard Bureau that, hey, you need to make a decision here. What force structure are you going to give up? So if, for instance, I give up a battalion. If you're not familiar, we'll talk you through that through the Guard 101, but you have platoons, companies, 4 companies within a battalion, 3 battalions normally within a brigade. If I lose a battalion, that's between 200 and 250 jobs in Vermont. That's a commander position, a lieutenant colonel. That's a sergeant major position. It's 3 company commanders. It's 3 first sergeants. It's probably 13 to 17 full-time jobs, all of the part-time jobs, all the benefits that come with it, the federal payroll that comes into the state to support that unit, the operational tempo money, the money to support facilities, and we will lose the equipment that's associated with that unit. If I use my brigade support battalion, which was in the lead for COVID, if that's the direction we go, one, I have to brief the governor. I don't want to be that person. Imagine going down there and say, we're going to lose 25 Hall assets. We're going to lose you're going to lose the medical company that did all those vaccines. You're going to lose the engineers, possibly, the support personnel that distributed 3.2 million meals 2 summers ago with the food bank. That's why we have to fix recruiting. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That and 500 vacancies to me means that there are 500 Vermonters that could have a really good part-time job. How many people know that if you're a single person in our National Guard for $50 a month, you can have health care? For $27 a month, you can have 2 cleanings a year and an x-ray for dental care. For $27-ish a month, you'll have $400,000 in term life insurance. We'll pay for your college. If you join the right specialty, Air or Army, I have incentives up to $20,000 for an enlistment bonus. Cyber specialists, combat medics, logisticians. We'll move those incentives to better target where the need is the greatest. We have that latitude, but I've got to grow the Guard, and they're out there. We just have to find them. So the other thing, and I'll get into in depth, will be hopefully in front of you in the next few weeks. You'll be seeing it here soon, is our annual report on sexual harassment and sexual assault. I'll be reviewing that today when I get back to work. And inclusive in that, we also provide the gender report, even though that's not required by law. That's something that I take great pride in. It's been not insignificant effort on our part to fix that. I can tell you right now, compared to where we were 3.5 years ago when I got this job, we have more women in senior leadership positions in our Guard than in its history. Not because they're women, because we changed policy and made it an order of merit. We changed, for instance, our officer career management plan to make it competitive. We're simply picking the best person for the job. So when you change policy, sometimes it works. And this is an example of that. 3.5 years ago, we didn't have any women flying the F-35. Now we have 2. I was just down in DC yesterday. Had dinner with Lieutenant Colonel Kristen Hubbard. She came to us off active duty. And now she is a senior officer flying the F-35 for us. She is also an F-16 instructor pilot. She's a combat veteran and an F-35 pilot. And oh, by the way, she also was a Thunderbird pilot. Yeah, we'll take that. We also have Lieutenant Kelsey Flannery, who's the first woman in the Air National Guard to ever fly the F-35. I understand the challenge of that. That is a 3-year track for her to become a pilot. And that training doesn't stop. She's now becoming a good wingman. So I haven't brought her out. I'm trying to protect her, to be perfectly honest. Her job is to fly the jet and work towards becoming a flight lead and growing the organization. I don't want to put any distractions on her when she's doing that. I think if you made the legislator day this past Saturday, you got to meet her very briefly. But there'll be an opportunity for her to come down, and I've given her the kind of the read ahead, like, no, you will go and meet the legislature because yes, it's a big deal. But it's not because you're a woman. That's a distinction, certainly. But I would really like for you to hear her process and how she's been integrated into our fighter wing. What I really want you to hear is, in her terms, it was a non-event. She's just a member of the Air Guard flying the F-35. And that's really the direction we're going as an organization. And it's markedly different than where we were 3.5 years ago. So you probably saw, you'll see it in the bio, I'm active, not just in Vermont. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want in this job. My perspective, we can all do more. You're doing it. You're here as legislators. So I'm on multiple committees, advisory councils at the national level. It was probably a little over a year ago, I was asked for by name with one other adjutant general, a good friend of mine from Nevada, General Andre Berry. I also served with him as the vice chair of the National Guard Joint Diversity Executive Council, but we were asked to be on the General Officer Steering Committee to completely revise the National Guard approach to sexual harassment and sexual assault and suicide prevention. So there are 2 task forces that we're working with at the national level. I'll talk a little more in depth about that when we come down to brief you on the annual report. The reason I was asked for is because of the work that my folks are doing here. I get to be the spokesman, and that's because of them. They're the reason, in large part, that Vermont is in the first group of states to receive a violence prevention workforce, a full-time workforce of 6 people, GS-13, 2 GS-12s, 2 GS-11s, and an attorney advisor. So at least some of that focus will be on working sexual assault cases, sexual harassment instances, equal opportunity. And we'll see how it goes. One thing that we do have coming here within this violence prevention workforce, one is we've never had a violence prevention workforce. The prevention piece, yes.
What's GS-12? What's GS?
So those are federal employees. These are, yeah, so I'll probably explain how we're built. If you're a traditional drilling member and a full-time technician, you're under Title 32. So you're a uniform member of the Guard, but you're paid as a federal technician during the week. and then you drill with us on weekends. If you're a Title V, you are a civilian member of our Guard, a federal technician. You can be in the Guard, but many of them are not. And what they do is provide continuity of effort within programs for us. They generally go to a job and stay there longer than a uniform member does. We also have active Guard and Reserve, parallels active duty. You're in essence an active Guard and Reserve member, also known as AGR, which is what I did for a number of years until I was elected to this position. And I'm a state employee. Oh, we have that too. Well, it's reasonably complex. But having these folks as Title V gives us that continuity. And it addresses a deficiency that we've had as an organization for years, where the sexual assault response coordinators were doing dual duty. They were forced to do not just response, but they're also having to work in the prevention field. It's ineffective. And it's not fair to them nor to the organization. So this violence prevention workforce will focus specifically on that, and inclusive in that is to address domestic abuse, domestic violence. We haven't had that resource before. We're always dependent on external agencies. It's a great relationship. We're happy to work with them, but this will give us another element that we haven't had in the past. So that's kind of important. I was also the only adjutant general to speak with the DOD Interim Review Commission, focusing on sexual assault, especially after the incident with Vanessa Guillen at Fort Hood. I was very blunt. I will tell you, it is the one thing. I can send folks to harm's way. I can send them overseas to do their job, any of the combatant commands. I can sleep well doing that because I know they've got the training, they're equipped properly, and they're able to do that job. What I can't do is predict behaviors. It is a human endeavor. I can try to change those behaviors, but the folks that we have, especially the traditional drilling members, we literally have them within our purview as a Guard about 7% of their life. So when you're changing culture, this is where that violence prevention workforce comes in. I mentioned it to the caucus the other day. In my view, one of my sexual assault response coordinators, where I was talking about my frustrations, and she said about climate, changing the culture. And she said, you don't change the culture. You change the climate. The organization changes the culture. I think we're getting there. But everything that we do as leaders, in my perspective, is a shaping operation. You make it better for who comes next. And we're going to keep doing that as a Guard. And you're going to be a part of that. So thanks for doing it. I'll get off my soapbox. We're going for 35 minutes now. So I could talk all day about the Guard.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And sorry I had to step out to go talk to Ways and Means. Do folks have questions for General Knight? Representative Cooper Randolph.
What is the timeline for saving the recruitment issue? You know, how long do you have to fix that?
So one of the good things is that everybody is experiencing the challenge. The bad thing is some states are successful and they're more willing to take on our force structure. I think we're there. That we're already identified as one of the lower performing states. And this is done in conjunction with modernization. When we modernize, that will change our force structure a little bit. That probably doesn't happen until 2028, 2030. So we have to start showing corrective action now. I would anticipate by this time next year, somebody's probably going to say, what are you going to give up? And we're not in a position where we can divest much of anything. We're already a multi-state brigade. So we're participating, it's not just Vermont, our brigade headquarters, for instance, our largest Army unit is here in Vermont. We have companies in Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Colorado. Any one of those states would love to have that brigade headquarters. If we lose the brigade headquarters, we might lose the distinction of being the only mountain brigade in the Army. And that could in turn impinge on the Army Mountain Warfare School mission. We just had a $30 million facility built at Camp Ethan Allen. It is state of the art. And that helps us. We are the executive agent for Army Mountain Warfare. And nothing good comes from that. But we're at a point now, if you keep divesting, and if I send too much of our force structure out of state, it's a cutthroat business. Somebody in another state is going to look at that and say, how can you be a brigade headquarters when the majority of your brigade doesn't reside in Vermont? Not the business we want to get into.
Cooper of Burlington.
Welcome. I was kind of shocked to hear the distance outside of the borders that Guard members come to serve in Vermont. I've been troubled by what I think is the difference between a Guard member that serves and a Guard member that has been federalized in terms of access to benefits. You prepared to hit on that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So something we're working on at the national level and all the adjutants general are working with General Hokanson, who's the chief of National Guard Bureau. And for a very long time, there's been a disparity in pay and benefits, active duty versus Guard. Healthcare is not least among them. So if you're on active duty, your healthcare is free. You have the infrastructure. You can either go to the military treatment facility or you have TRICARE at no cost to the member. The Guard doesn't have that. So if I'm participating in Blue Cross Blue Shield, but as a traditional drilling member of the Guard, if I wanted to insure my family with TRICARE, it's about $250 a month. Not horrible, but if that's what your drill paycheck covers, well, kind of defeats the purpose of getting a paycheck. It's great. You're getting a service for your family. So the initiative now, and it's got some traction, it's been introduced as a bill on Capitol Hill, is to, one, achieve parity. It's a bunch of other subtleties in there. Flight pay, for instance, hazardous duty pay, all the things that the Guard does as good, if not better than active duty. There's still differences in flight pay, hazardous duty pay, all the different categories of pay that the active duty gets that we simply don't. But healthcare is really the big one for us. Access to healthcare is another problem altogether, but getting at least our Guard members, the uniform members, to not have to pay for healthcare.
VA benefits.
So VA benefits, it's a little bit more complex. You have to look at the federal definition of a veteran. Go back, I haven't looked at that in a while. But normally if you have the rule is if you have a DD 214, meaning you served, that's your keys to the kingdom, that's your discharge certificate from active duty. If you're in the National Guard, we don't get DD 214s if you've never been deployed. You have what we call a National Guard Bureau Form 22. The VA doesn't recognize that form, as I understand it. So you're not given veteran status.
I'm wondering what is the rough percentage of decline in recruitment over the past couple of years?
I can get you those numbers, ma'am. There's it's been a slow decline, and it's retention is a part of it, keeping the folks we have, because our operational tempo is very high. And we're pretty candid with folks about, look, service in the Guard is not for everybody. Yes, it's a part-time job, and it is not convenient. So that's really the start of the conversation is if you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself, then come talk to us. We're an open book. But the decline, if I go back, when I did the recruiting job, I finished that job after 4 years in 2012. My last year in, we put 420 people in our Guard. And that's not just new enlistments, that's prior service members. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I got about 3 minutes. But I'll get you the data to show you where we were and where we are now. But it's been a pretty precipitous decline. And there's some other things here, and that's probably a whole other session if you're interested. It might involve sidebar conversations with beer, because the military enlistment processing station, their idiosyncrasies across them, the success rate across that enterprise is about 67%. We're losing a third of the folks we actually bring down to enlist. And military entrance standards are not keeping up, in my view, with medical science. There are medications out there now where a condition would precluded your military service now is treatable with 1 injection every 6 months. Well, why are we not modifying and giving those folks the opportunity to serve? But I'll get you that data.
Representative Morgan.
Just a couple things that I'll shed light on to I don't know what General Knight said as a graduate of that institution. And I think that we could all, granted we're a legislature of 180 people, but we talk to a lot of citizenry. So things to kind of help put in your quiver, like he touched on healthcare. As a retiree at age 60, most of you would probably hate me for the fact that I paid just slightly north of $700 for my wife and I for gold-plated healthcare for the year. So that is, granted, you got to wait till the age of 60 to obtain that. If you're a traditional guardsman, as an AGR, you would get it immediately. But as a active guard reserve component person, but we'll get more into those later. But so that, I know when I was a 25-year-old person, I thought that was forever and a million years away, but that came quick. And so that is a huge benefit. There's one sell point. Another is the synergy or the back and forth, especially for our traditional, we call our traditional guardsmen, which are our folks that do the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year moniker thing that you hear. Those folks go back in your community and they bring that guard training and vice versa, the training from their civilian career fields to the guard. And so we capitalize on that in our communities, and they also get experience of training from the guard that's paid for in a lot of times. I mean, you have people that are master plumbers, master electricians. I mean, all kinds of, you could go down huge rabbit holes of things that they bring to the table. And a lot of it gets paid for by the military training that they get. And one little quick vignette, and then I'll get off my soapbox, is when I was deployed in 2004 to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, we had an active duty unit flying Strike Eagles F-15Es that flew using the same engine, two engines of the same single engine we flew in the F-16 at the time. And they were having difficulty with a problem that was plaguing their engine community and keeping those aircraft mission ready to go fly critical missions. That's, what was going on in 2004. And so the group chief there said to me, he said, "Sir, your guys are here on station, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got good mechanics, right?" I said, "Yeah." So I put them in touch, the active duty guys, in touch with the guys and gals in our engine shop from the Ron Air National Guard. And the supervisor of that section was a senior master sergeant, had more time as an engine mechanic in the Guard than the age of those engine mechanics in the active duty. So think about that, the experience that we bring to the fight and to the table. And just so all that synergy, all that experience is just huge for back, and I think you can see between our communities and our Guard. So those are some sell points I just throw out. And please talk to me offline. I don't mean to take up all our time with that. I'm passionate about it because it's my alma mater, and I think it does bring a lot of good to a lot of Vermonters, and it's an important part of the fabric of our communities. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could have another 2 minutes, if you could indulge me.
Oh, yeah, please.
One of the things that we're really focusing on, and Representative Morgan hit on it, if you'll probably have legislation, pending. My approach is from workforce development, right? Because the Guard is a significant part of that. Vermont is an amazing place to work, to live, raise your kids. Our quality of life here, to me, is second to none. I travel a lot for this job. I've been to Africa multiple times. I'm happy to come home. We need to grow the Guard. We need to grow the workforce in Vermont. So there are things that this legislature can do. My approach from workforce development, and the reason we need, in my view, to incentivize Vermont is exactly what Representative Morgan is talking about. There's a prior service market out there. And we have recruiters that work. We call them reserve component career counselors in the Army. They work at active duty installations. Their mission is to get somebody who's coming off active duty after their first term of enlistment, or if they're coming out as a first lieutenant or a captain at 6 years, and put them in the Guard or Reserve. My preference, obviously, is the National Guard. Like a similar program the Air Guard has is the in-service recruiter, also known as ISRs. They work at active duty Air Force installations. I was down at the Air National Guard Readiness Center yesterday, and this is the 6th person that I pitched down there in the past 3 years. I want to develop what we call an all-service recruiter. Give me a resource here. Let me pilot it for 2 years. I want to target that prior service market. You look, and again, I don't do math in public, but if you look at Fort Drum is the largest active duty military installation to us. They have 15,000 soldiers there. If their attrition rate is between 13 and 14%, and it probably is, that's 2,000 soldiers alone that separate from Fort Drum every year. Now you amplify that across the globe, every branch of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard. Why are we not going after them? If they are relocating to the Northeast, let's go after them and make Vermont a place for them to come work and live and raise their kids. They're going to be coming to you in many instances, even if they are retiring from the military after 20 years of service, probably between the ages of 18 and 40, or 20 years of service, 38 and 42. I am an aberration. I'm an old soldier. They're going to come here and be a viable member of the community. They're going to go back into the workforce. They're probably going to have health care. They're going to pay their taxes. They're going to raise their kids, going to go back into the workforce. They're going to have a security clearance. They're going to have a work ethic and a clean urinalysis. That's worth a lot to an employer in Vermont. So look forward to working with you. I think we can grow the Guard, but I just can't do it by myself. And you're going to be a significant part of that. But thanks for doing it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Byron.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back to the force structure issue with the recruitment. How many recruits do you need within this shortish window to maintain that force structure? And second part of the question, you know, we saw the amazing work your organization did during COVID. Disaster preparedness and readiness is a big part of what the state mission is. We hadn't really seen that to scale since Tropical Storm Irene. What would that force structure reduction do to your organization's ability to react to a disaster of these magnitudes?
It would make us dependent on emergency management compacts, EMACs, with neighboring states. We do that anyway. That's a relationship that we all have. You know, if we don't have heavy lift helicopters, I would lean on New York. If I need fixed wing to move logistics, I'd probably lean on New Hampshire. If our engineer assets are overwhelmed, again, you're always leaning on another state to bring that in, adds to the timeline. And they're going to have their own problems if the scale of the storm or whatever it is we're responding to is big enough. So what I can only imagine how much more we could have done as a Guard if we had those vacancies filled. I look at the economic impact. Even now, in what I view as a fairly crippled state, we bring in about $153 million in federal payroll every year, an additional $46 million in operations and maintenance. So I manage about a $200 million budget. So if we don't fill it, it doesn't go well. It's going to impinge directly on our ability to respond effectively to any sense of scale, depending on what that force structure is that we end up losing.
Thank you.
Representative Murwicki.
I don't need for you to go into this in detail now because I'm assuming you'll be back here, but at a future date, it might be helpful to hear more about the Guard response to natural disasters here in Vermont, and especially as climate keeps bringing us storm of the century every 2 years. Chainsaws are going to be just as valuable as any piece of equipment that you have, but it seems to be an integral part of your mission. Is that?
Yep. We have it's a dual mission set for us, state mission, which is really our primary mission. And that federal mission, when we train for that training and that equipment, those resources are actually used in support of our domestic response mission. I characterized it, I was kind of joking with the Chief of Guard Bureau. If you look at the past 2 years, it's been wildfires, floods, hurricanes, the insurrection, while preparing for and deploying. Seen those Flex Seal commercials? We're like Flex Seal. We're good for everything. Certainly the pandemic response. But.
I think one of the advantages that we have with you as the Adjutant General is that you have a sense of humor, and I think that some of your counterparts may have a reputation as not having one generally. Are there any other questions for our Adjutant General before we wrap up this initial visit from him and his team? Okay, well, thank you very much for.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for having, I think about half of the committee was up for the Vermont National Guard Legislator Day and learned a lot. And I really appreciated the time and the opportunity to be on base and learn a little bit more about what y'all do there.
Yes, sir. We're happy to host those. And we're going to keep doing that, different venues across the Guard. We're not Area 51. We need people to come see us. And they're your constituents. I think that's the other important thing. And that's one other thing before we wrap up. You're probably I'll be down here hopefully once a week, schedule permitting, if I'm not traveling. I'm not coming down here necessarily to testify. But what I want to do is bring down some of my soldiers and airmen to, in essence, see how the sausage gets made here. Kind of my own internal lesson on civics. This job has been opaque to most members of the Guard. And you can see that Nobody knows what the adjutant general does. It's like, oh, he's traveling again. I have to make the next me. And I have to get these people in front of you because you may very well see them as a candidate for adjutant general. And if I don't level that playing field, we could end up with, a kind of a polarizing event. And it doesn't need to be that way. The downside of coming down here and showing them how it's done is they may not want to run, but I will at least give them the opportunity to come down, have some face time and learn what it is that this legislature does. And that's irrespective of rank. I mean, I think it's important for junior enlisted members to know what it is this Guard does with the legislature.
All right, well, I think that is going to wrap it up for our morning testimony today. So we will be back here at 1:00 and we'll be shifting gears to get some introduction from folks from other parts of state and regional government. So looking forward to continuing our introduction.